I shouldn't remember the exact words, but I do. She said, "We're just friends." And I asked, before I could stop myself, "Then why do you feel like more?" That was weeks ago. Still, it won't leave me. I work at a small repair shop. Old radios, clocks, sometimes phones that people don't trust the bigger stores with. It's not glamorous. It smells like solder and coffee that's gone bitter from sitting on the burner too long. But she comes in here. Not often, just enough for me to notice the way the room tilts when she does. Her name's Claire. Mid-40s, maybe. Confident in a way that doesn't announce itself, but you feel it. She carries herself like someone who doesn't need to explain who she is anymore. Sharp lines softened with warmth, like she knows how to laugh at herself, and probably at me, too. The first time she walked in, it was with an old record player tucked under her arm, heavier than it looked. She set it down on the counter, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said, almost apologetically, "I don't know if anyone even fixes these anymore." I told her I could try. My hands felt clumsy just plugging it in. That should have been it. A transaction, nothing more. But it wasn't. The shop was quiet that day. No background music, just the faint tick of a wall clock and the static hum of fluorescent lights. She stayed as I worked, leaning against the counter, asking small questions like she didn't really need the answers. "Do you ever get tired of this place? Or does anyone still buy clocks anymore?" Her voice had this calm rhythm, and I found myself answering more than I usually would. I'm not the talkative type. Normally, I let silence do the work. But she had this way of holding eye contact just a second too long, making me want to fill it. At one point, I fumbled a screwdriver, and it clattered against the counter. She reached out. Reflex, nothing more, but her hand brushed mine as she steadied it. Just that. A touch so small it shouldn't have mattered. But the air shifted. She didn't pull back right away, and I didn't either. For a breath, it felt like something was unfolding between us, something neither of us had named yet. Then she smiled, quick, dismissive, almost like she'd caught herself, and said, "Relax. We're just friends." I should have nodded, laughed it off. That would have been the smart thing. But instead, the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Then why do you feel like more?" Her smile faltered. Not gone. Just paused, as if the question landed somewhere she hadn't expected. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, steady, unreadable, and then glanced away, brushing dust from the sleeve of her coat. We didn't talk about it again. She left with her record player, and I went back to tightening screws, pretending my hands weren't still shaking. But the silence she left behind stayed heavier than the noise. And that one line, mine, reckless and too honest, plays back in my head every night. "Then why do you feel like more?" She came back a week later, not with the record player this time, but with a clock. A brass one, heavy, with a cracked glass face. "It belonged to my father," she said, setting it carefully on the counter. "I don't even know if it works anymore." Her voice was steady, but her hands told a different story. She brushed her palms together after she placed it down, like she was shaking something off. I noticed how her nails were short, uneven, not the kind of hands you'd expect from someone who carried herself with so much poise. I wanted to say something, "I'll take care of it, don't worry," but the words stuck. Instead, I just nodded and pulled the clock closer, setting my tools out. She lingered again, same as before, leaning against the counter like she wasn't in a rush. This time, though, there was a distance in her posture. Arms crossed loosely, chin tilted down, her eyes tracing the shelves instead of me. "You must see a lot of people coming through here," she said eventually. "Not really," I admitted. "Mostly regulars. People who don't want to throw things away." Her lips curved, half a smile, half something else. "That's rare. Most people, they'd rather replace things than fix them." Her tone was casual, but the way she said it carried a weight I couldn't place. I looked up, but she'd already shifted her gaze to the window, like she hadn't meant to say as much. I kept working in silence, the tick of the clock's gears clicking under my fingers. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her rub her wrist absent-mindedly, then stop, as if catching herself. "You okay?" I asked before I could think better of it. She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, yes, just tired." Her laugh followed, soft and short, like it was meant to erase what slipped through. But it didn't. It only made the crack in her armor more visible. I wanted to ask why tired, or what keeps you up, but I didn't. I just nodded again, pretending to focus on the gears, though my hands moved slower than they needed to. She stepped closer, peering over the counter at the pieces I'd laid out. Her sleeve brushed my arm, and for a moment, the scent of her perfume, faint, like jasmine fading, wrapped around me. I don't think she noticed how still I went. Or maybe she did, and that's why she pulled back too quickly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, like the room itself had gone tighter. Finally, she said, "You don't have to rush. I can wait." I glanced up, and for the first time, her eyes stayed on mine longer than I expected. Something flickered there, uncertainty, maybe, or something she didn't want me to see. She looked away before I could name it, tucking her hair behind her ear. I finished tightening the last screw, my pulse louder than the ticking inside the clock. When I handed it back, our fingers didn't touch this time. But she hesitated before taking it, the smallest pause, like her hand hovered in that space on purpose. And then she smiled, quiet, restrained, just enough to carry me through the silence after she left. It was late. I should have closed the shop an hour earlier, but the storm outside gave me an excuse to keep the lights on. Rain hammered the windows, heavy enough to blur the street into moving streaks. That's when she appeared. Umbrella useless, hair damp at the ends, coat clinging dark around her shoulders. "You're still open," Claire said, almost surprised. "Storm didn't exactly invite me home," I said, pushing the door shut behind her. She laughed softly, shaking water from her sleeve. Same. She wasn't carrying anything broken this time. No record player, no clock, just herself. And for a second, I thought she might actually admit that. But instead, she wandered the shelves like she was looking for something worth fixing. "You don't mind if I waited out here, do you?" I shook my head. "Not at all. I made coffee, though it was late enough neither of us should have been drinking it." She wrapped her hands around the mug anyway, letting the steam rise into her face. In the warm glow of the shop, her damp hair curled slightly at her temples. I noticed how tired her eyes looked, shadows soft beneath them, the kind of tired that didn't come from just one bad night's sleep. She caught me watching and tilted her head. "You always this quiet?" "Depends who I'm with." "Meaning me?" I shrugged. "Meaning you don't fill silences with useless noise. Most people do." Her smile flickered, not wide, but real. "That's nicer than it sounds." The rain pressed harder against the glass. We were sitting closer than before, the counter not separating us this time. Just two chairs, side by side, mugs between us. For a moment, neither of us said anything. And in that pause, I almost asked the question sitting at the back of my throat. "Why are you really here? Why do you keep coming back?" But before I could speak, her phone lit up on the counter. A name flashed across the screen, Daniel. The sound of it cut through the quiet like glass breaking. She froze, staring at it, her hand hovering but not answering. The phone buzzed again, until she flipped it face down with more force than needed. I pretended not to notice, though my chest tightened anyway. "Sorry," she said, voice thinner than usual. "You don't have to explain." She exhaled slowly, rubbing her thumb against the mug's handle. "I know, but sometimes I feel like I should." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. The only sound was rain on the glass, heavy, insistent, wrapping us in a bubble too fragile to last. Her hand shifted on the table, fingers just close enough that if I moved mine half an inch, we'd touch. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Instead, I kept still, watching the space between our hands, my restraint louder than anything I could have said. She didn't come by for 2 weeks. Long enough that I convinced myself maybe she wouldn't again. Then one evening, near closing, I looked up and there she was, standing in the doorway like she wasn't sure if she should step in. No storm this time, no excuse. Just her. "You're late," I said, before I could stop myself. Her lips curved faintly. "Late for what?" "For? I don't know." I set my tools down. "I guess I thought you'd stop coming." She shut the door softly, the bell above it giving the smallest chime. I almost did. That hung there between us. I didn't ask why. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She wandered the shop aimlessly, her fingers skimming along the shelves, pausing now and then over objects she didn't pick up. Finally, she stopped by the counter where I stood. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked quietly. "About what?" Her eyes found mine, steady but tired. "This. Whatever this is." The room went still. The wall clock ticked like it was trying to fill the silence for us. I swallowed. "Every day." Her breath caught, just slightly, almost hidden. She leaned against the counter, folding her arms, as though bracing herself. "This isn't normal," she said finally. "I don't mean you. I mean me. I shouldn't." She broke off, pressing her lips together, then shook her head. "I shouldn't be here." I wanted to reach across, to ground her, to tell her she was allowed. But instead I asked, "Then why are you?" Her gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted back to me, sharp in its honesty. "Because it feels easier here than anywhere else." And I don't know what that says about me. We stood in silence after that. Not the easy kind we'd shared before. This one was heavy, suffocating, loaded with the things neither of us wanted to say. Finally, she looked away, blinking hard, like she was holding something back. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You're too young to understand the weight of wanting something you shouldn't." The words cut deeper than any touch could, and for once, I didn't try to answer. I just let them settle, because anything I said would have broken the fragile truth hanging between us. The shop was empty when she came in again, a Saturday afternoon where the air outside was too hot to breathe. She didn't bring anything to fix this time, just a folded envelope in her hand, pressed tight, like she was afraid it might vanish. She sat on the stool across from me, no preamble, no practice smile. "I want to tell you something," she said. Her voice carried the kind of weight that makes you set everything else down. I did. Tools, rag, even the half-mended watch I'd been working on, all pushed aside. She laid the envelope on the counter. "I found this last week. It's a letter. From my husband. Ex-husband." I didn't move. She didn't open it, either. Just traced the edge of it with her fingertip, like it was a wound. "He wrote it years ago," she went on, almost flatly. "Back when things were breaking. I kept it sealed. I thought maybe, if I never read it, I could pretend it didn't matter. But last week I opened it." Her laugh was sharp and small, like breaking glass. "I don't even know why I'm telling you this." I wanted to say, "Because you trust me." But instead I asked, "What did it say?" She looked at me then, eyes glossy but unbroken. That he missed who I used to be. That he couldn't find her anymore. A pause. That he was leaving because of it. The words lingered, raw, hanging between us like smoke. She folded her arms tightly, as though she could hold herself together that way. "It's pathetic, isn't it? I can still feel the sting of someone walking away, even years later." I shook my head. "That's not pathetic. That's human." Silence followed. Long, stretched, the kind that presses against your ribs. I could hear the ceiling fan ticking overhead, the hum of the old cooler, the tiny sounds that filled a room when two people were holding back too much. She studied me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "You remind me of him. Not the one who left. The one before." I didn't breathe for a second. Her words weren't romantic. They weren't meant to be. But they landed with the force of something that shook the ground I was standing on. I wanted to ask her what she meant, who he was before, what exactly she saw in me that mirrored the man she'd lost. But I didn't. The weight of it pressed too hard against my throat. Instead, I just nodded, barely, as though anything louder would break the fragile moment in half. Her hand brushed the envelope again, then pulled away quickly, as if touching it burned. "I don't know why I keep coming here," she whispered. "But I can't seem to stop." The words cracked something open in me. Quiet, devastating, and impossible to ignore. She came by after closing again. No excuse this time. No clock or record player. Not even an envelope. Just her. I didn't ask why. I only unlocked the door wider and let her in. The shop was dim except for the desk lamp casting a cone of yellow across the counter. The silence felt different tonight. Less hesitant. More resigned, like we'd both run out of ways to pretend. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. For a long time neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the repaired clock on the shelf, marking each second we let slip by. Finally, she said. I don't know how to name this. Her voice wasn't shaky. It was steady, but low, like it cost her something to say it out loud. I swallowed, leaning back on the stool. Maybe we don't need to name it. She looked at me then, really looked, and it felt like being seen down to the bone. Not admired, not judged, just known. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd been circling for weeks, everything neither of us had dared to put into words. I shifted, resting my arm on the counter, and her hand, hesitant, trembling almost imperceptibly, moved just close enough. Not touching, not quite, but close enough that the heat between our skin felt louder than any confession. I didn't move closer. She did. Barely. Her fingers brushed mine, the lightest touch, as though testing if the world would end because of it. It didn't. Neither of us pulled away. Her breath came out slow, uneven. She turned her head, staring at the lamp's glow instead of me. I can't give you more than this, she whispered. I'm not asking for more, I said. That made her close her eyes. And when she opened them, she leaned, just enough that her forehead rested against mine. Not a kiss, not a declaration. Just closeness, quiet and fragile, like the most dangerous secret in the world. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Everything was already said without words. We stayed like that, the hum of the lamp above us, the clock ticking steady, her hand barely brushing mine. And in that silence, I understood, whatever this was, it wasn't going back into the box. Looking back now, I don't think there was a single moment when it happened. No thunderclap, no grand confession. Just small pieces, adding up, silences, glances, pauses that stretched too long to be casual. It's strange. When she first walked into the shop with that broken record player, I thought she was just another customer. A face, a voice, a transaction. But every time she returned, something in me shifted, little by little, until I couldn't tell where the pretending ended and the truth began. Claire never said she loved me. I never said it, either. But maybe that's why it mattered more, because it was never about words. It was about the spaces in between them. I learned that connection doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes quietly, like water seeping through cracks, filling the places you didn't even know were empty. She taught me that love, if you can even call it that, doesn't have to be about promises or labels. It can be a look across a dimly lit room, a hand that hovers just close enough, a forehead resting against yours when words are too heavy to speak. She carried her past with her. Regret, heartbreak, the weight of someone leaving. And maybe, in me, she saw something she thought was gone forever. Not to replace it, not to erase it, but to remind her it once existed. In me, I found out that sometimes being seen is enough. Not fixed, not solved, just seen. We didn't become a storybook ending. There was no neat ribbon tying it all together. What we had was quieter than that, more fragile, but maybe more real. A kind of love, or something close to it, that doesn't burn fast and loud but hums steady, even in silence. And in the end, that silence spoke louder than any declaration could have. Maybe that's the lesson. Not all love stories are about forever. Some are about right now. About finding a space where you can breathe, even if the world outside doesn't understand it. So tell me, have you ever had someone who felt like more than a friend, even when you both pretended otherwise?